Well, welcome back to the North Texas Secular Convention. I know it is a little early, but I'm sure our first speaker will prove that it'll be worth your time. Our next speaker is the Texas State Director for American Atheists, popular YouTube personality, and just an overall really great guy to talk to. Aron, everyone.
Thank you, sir. That was a very good introduction. Pardon me while I'm still getting a little bit set up here. All right. Now, for the last year, I have been the Texas State Director of American Atheists, and that means that I'm supposed to pay attention to the culture wars going on in this state and do what I can to call attention to certain things that would be of interest to secularists, atheists, skeptics, and so on. I was supposed to represent American atheists in the state, and I meant to do just that. But 2012 has been a surprisingly quiet year. One reason is, let me see if I can get this back in this panel. Oh, hold on. Nope, hold on. Techno stuff. Yeah, it's not advancing. Whoever set up the PowerPoint, can you hand me a hand because it's not advancing. And it won't go back.
Like Freebird.
All right, let's see. Okay. Yeah, the first problem was that our beloved governor was running his campaign for a megalomaniac in chief. And we also lost a few of the revisionaries, so the revisionaries lost some of their ability to do the damage on the level that they had done. And for those of you who recognize them, Terry Leo, Don McLeroy, Gail Lowe, and Cynthia Dunbar have all quit or been defeated. Yay. They simply failed to make their nomination. And we've got another one coming up that I can talk about in just a little bit. Before the current legislature, that was the other thing, is that our legislature has been out of session too, because they only go to work every couple of years. So our most visible threats have been out of commission until now. So, and then Dwayne Bohawk pre-submitted his Merry Christmas bill, and here you see him on the floor of the state capitol with his Christmas tree that he's so proud of. He got upset that people were putting up holiday trees. He wants to make sure everybody calls them Christmas trees. And so he submitted the Merry Christmas bill, and it allows teachers to put up decorations specifying their particular religious perspective during the holiday season. And he thinks that the fact that we call it a Christmas tree is what atheists are upset about, but in the eyes of atheists or pagans, Christians putting up Christmas trees only highlights their hypocrisy, since the Bible forbids such practice. Ironically, the problem was that he added something in an apparent attempt to conceal the fact that he is promoting one religion over any other. His bill would permit parents, teachers, and students to celebrate traditional winter holidays on school grounds. And to clarify, we are not talking about putting up Christmas plays or hanging ornaments in the hallways. We are encouraging teachers to express their personal religious beliefs to their students in the classroom. This is something no one should endorse, even if everyone involved were Christians. But the bill doesn't require that anyone has to celebrate Christmas. If it did, it would be unconstitutional. Nor does Bohawk's bill limit observance only to Christmas. Despite its name, the Merry Christmas bill would allow teachers who don't celebrate Christmas to observe other religious holidays instead. Specifically, it allows teachers to distinguish their religious perspective by using traditional winter greetings such as, but not necessarily limited to, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or Happy Holidays. Now, at first glance, a typical Texas Christian may feel pretty safe with this. He thinks maybe that they're only accommodating two holidays of a Judeo-Christian tradition, and if so, that would already be pretty bad because Jews barely exist in this state. And there's no need, there's a lot of anti-Semitism, and there's no need to generate that kind of conflict, traditional conflict in the classroom. But the bill isn't that limited. It says traditional winter holidays, and that means any traditional winter holiday with the implication that it also be religious. And even the most learned Southern fundamentalists would feel pretty safe limiting freedom of religious expression only to those holidays traditionally associated with winter. Muslims do not all collectively share an annual observance in December, nor a traditional winter holiday that I'm aware of, and neither do Hindus. If either of them did, and Bohak knew it, I doubt he would have presented the bill the way it is. The Buddhists do have a winter holiday. The 8th of December is Rahatsu, the Bodhi Day of Enlightenment, and we have quite a few Asian immigrants in the state, many of them Buddhists, and Bohak's bill would implicitly allow teachers to decorate their classrooms to celebrate that holiday instead of Christmas or Hanukkah. It says that either faculty members or their parents may use displays associated with these holidays, including, but apparently not limited to, menorahs, Christmas trees, nativity scenes. And the fact that the Christmas tree, the lights on the tree, the holly wreath, and the Yule log, and the mistletoe, and even the manger scene are all traditionally elements of previously pagan holidays, originally on the same day that we now celebrate Christmas, means that Wiccan teachers would be permitted to share their polytheistic traditions with their students, whether it be for Saturnalia, Yule, or the winter solstice, which also works if they happen to be atheist. But is any non-Christian teacher really going to do that? While those with the most popular majority religion in this region could use this opportunity to earn brownie points with some parents and co-workers, those in the minority position would be effectively outed one way or another, whether they chose to participate or whether they chose not to. We know by experience and example that there are many administrators in the state who will discriminate against non-Christian teachers on the basis of religion, especially if you don't have any religion at all. This bill would marginalize non-Christians in the classroom even more than they already are, and it forces teachers to reveal what in many cases may be privately held beliefs which should not be scrutinized by principals, pupils, or the PTA. And I want to call a couple of examples from personal experience, and I hope my wife doesn't mind. As a teacher, my wife finds herself in an often compromised situation wherein she is the defendant of somebody else's religious freedoms in the classroom. For example, they are required in the state to give the Pledge of Allegiance, which I'm against, and you're required to say under God as part of that Pledge of Allegiance, which I'm against. And I feel a fairly patriotic person, but I don't believe that it is anybody's obligation to pledge an allegiance. I think that's a religious indoctrination statement. It's authoritarian, and my country deserves to, well, my country should earn my allegiance and not force me to promise to it no matter what. But one of our students was seen by one of the teachers across the hall that child was not giving the pledge with everyone else, and that teacher barged into the classroom, as I understand the story, she'll probably correct me later, and was berating the child, saying, "Don't you know that this is a Christian country and you need to pledge allegiance because it's under God?" And he's doing this, he's berating this child because he thinks that child is an atheist. And my wife, who is an atheist but dare not let anybody know that, is now defending this child's rights because she is a Jehovah's Witness, and it is her religious excuse that she doesn't have to pledge allegiance to anything. And I think it's strange that as typical, really, that it is the atheists who are defending freedom of religion and religious diversity against an intolerant domination. Now, another example is the way that she deals with the faculty. There are other people in administration, especially, this is a problem, where they will make statements intending to evoke a God response and an acknowledgement of God, and there would be this pregnant silence when my wife did not. And so this would cause eyes to narrow and questions to come. And when my wife said that she felt it inappropriate to discuss religion at work, she would get, again, with the squinted eyes, "Oh, come on, you can tell me what you believe." No, I can't, thank you very much. Now, many atheist teachers at least here in Texas, are cautious not to reveal what it is they don't believe, and believers consider it a violation of their own rights to hear why we don't believe. So there are few atheist teachers bold enough to celebrate the solstice instead of Christmas, and it would be wrong to politicize the classroom by doing so. This bill fails all three prongs of the Lemon test. That's Lemon versus Kurtzman. 1, it has no secular legislative purpose. 2, if passed, it will not only advance the already dominant religion in this country, but it will also invariably inhibit less popular faiths. And 3, it will certainly result in excessive government entanglement with religion, and I can promise you that. But that's a trivial thing, really. Graded on a curve of things we secular Texans have to deal with right now. The imaginary war on Christmas is just one of many impositions where religion is commonly thrust upon us. For example, the State Board of Education will be reviewing science books again this year. And just this last week, Barbara Cargill came up for nomination again. Her nomination is on Monday. She's one of the remaining revisionaries on the SBOE who wants school boards to teach all sides of evolution. The argument originally was that they wanted to teach both sides, and then somehow realizing that there was only one side, now they want to teach all sides. She's upset that when she looks up the textbooks, when she looks up the proposed text, she said, that every link, every lesson, everything she was taught is, this is how the origin of life happened, or this is what the fossil record proves. And she says, and that would be fine, but it's only one side. I had to post something to her Facebook yesterday. I posted that biological evolution was the only theory of biodiversity, and I did that because she says she wants, on her webpage, she says that she wants evolution taught as a theory, not a fact. So I wrote, it is the only theory of biodiversity, that it is an inescapable fact of population genetics, and I gave her a short lesson on what it is, just so that somebody out there would have posted a statement of this. Now you realize, this woman has already heard from over 100 of the best educated expert specialists anywhere ever, and she should know this. But when you look at her eyes, you don't really see that this is a... Education is not really the foremost thing on her mind. Also, incidentally, on her website, she promotes health books that teach abstinence only and do not permit birth control. She wants history books that has a bias toward Christians. And we all know, I think we all know, if we're all local Texans, what it is that the Board of Education has tried to do with history books, as well as science books, as well as health books, as well as to the environment and the economy, and I could go on and on. She also wants the health books to enforce discrimination against homosexuality simply by a falsified, imposed definition of marriage, which laughably is not supported by the Bible. Anybody wants to see a full examination of that, you should look up Betty Bowers on the internet and look up her definition of marriage. It's a hilarious video. Now, she comes up for nomination on Monday, and as I understand it, the odds are stacked in her favor. Apparently, it's an all-Republican, one Democrat group that's voting, and so she's definitely a shoo-in. I mean, how could you possibly beat that? However, recently, since she made this announcement, and since she said what she said about wanting to teach all sides, as I understand it, the Senate is now getting an earful about this woman, and that maybe they won't feel so comfortable putting her up again. So it had been suggested, Ryan Valentine of the Texas Freedom Network asked me to ask you to call the Senate, to call your representative legislators on Monday morning before her hearing, and maybe we can stack the deck a bit more. However, even if she is elected, she's not our biggest problem either. And I don't expect the same circus we've seen in the SBOE before. They've lost a lot of their power. They don't have the influence they used to have. Individual school districts can petition for their own books because this is the age of the internet, and Texas no longer has the clout that it carried once upon a time. And enemies of education had few successes with the State Board of Education, and they have a new strategy, and it represents a much more serious threat. As you know, Louisiana now has creationism being taught. Louisiana now has creationism being taught legally in the classroom. Their Republican State Representative Steve Carter said he'd been criticized for ramming it down everyone's throat, and he said that's the way ahead for Texas too, because he said there's no way to get big reforms done otherwise. Texas State Senator Dan Patrick recently said, "We don't have time for evolution in public schools. We need a revolution." Mind you, I'm now talking about events that have happened in the last month, and many of these have been only a week or less ago. Lieutenant David Dewhurst is already pushing for a major reform to defund the public school system through the use of vouchers. And let's see, what he wants to do is to divert tax dollars to private religious schools, and this will have privileged kids learning pseudoscience, which won't do them any good because it's demonstrably false. And it will leave underprivileged kids to be a problem of underfunded schools. So everyone suffers, and that's only part of what we have to look forward to. Hey, you remember when Madeleine Murray O'Hair stopped public schools from enforcing or directing children in prayer? Dwayne Bohock's Christmas tree bill is just one of the ways around that. Another one is a ploy called "See You at the Poll." This is what they were doing when my daughter was going to school. The teachers are prohibited from conducting prayer in school, from guiding the children in prayer on school grounds. So what they would do is that the teachers would invite the children to follow them outside, and they would go to the flagpole, and they would pray around the flagpole just to skirt this ruling, and they would grab onto the flagpole. And my daughter described it as being an amusing situation. All these people are grabbing the flagpole as if they're establishing a connection to an antenna to God. And children are still allowed to pray in school, of course. You can't stop people from talking to themselves, but people are prohibited. The teachers, rather, are prohibited from giving their students religious instruction to influence whether the child chooses to pray or what version of deity the child prays to. If you're Catholic or Jewish or Mormon or Muslim or even Jehovah's Witnesses, and especially if you're Sikh or Hindu, you don't want some Pentecostal teacher telling your children that they'll go to hell if they believe what their parents do, implying that the parents are going to hell too. So the founder of American Atheists should have been praised by every religious denomination for what she did back in 1963, and instead she was labeled as the most hated woman in America. She didn't kick God out of school. She didn't take prayer out of school either. All she did was make it illegal for government-funded educators to forcibly impose religious beliefs. However, nothing is permanent. So far, we've only talked about high schools. What about the elementary schools? What about the kindergarten kids? I will let the next speaker after me tell you more about that. All I will say now is that there's an old Jesuit saying, "Give me a child until he is 7 and I will give you the man." This is a comment on how impressionable the minds of young children are and how lasting those impressions can be. That's why religion wants to target school children. It is an unfair influence to have sequestered students forced to listen to trained instructors, and to have those instructors indoctrinating other people's kids, regardless of their family's faith or lack thereof. That's why we should all defend religious freedoms, and fundamentalist Christians would too, if they weren't already in the majority. Wherever in the world you are, the dominant religion doesn't care about less represented faiths in the area, because they're not held accountable by them, and they're not held accountable by secular states in most places either. So the more influence they have, the less they care about accuracy, accountability, or truth. Now, when I started getting into activism, one of the things that invited me in the last year and a half or so was a concerned parent contacted me not realizing that I had any affiliation, and I may not even have had an affiliation with American Atheists as of yet. But this concerned parent called me. His son was a high school student who was taking college courses where they do the divided credit. And they were taking a class on zoology. Now, if there's any class in which you would think that evolution must be taught, you could not avoid it, it would be in zoology. But they didn't have a zoologist or a taxonomist or any kind of biologist whatsoever teaching that class. Instead, they had a high school gym coach teaching zoology. Now remember, this was Richard Dawkins' class. This is what he taught. He was a professor of zoology, and he's being replaced effectively by a gym coach. And the gym coach, who clearly had no understanding or acceptance of evolution whatsoever, decided that since he had no idea what he was talking about at all, that what he would devote class time to instead of teaching zoology and instead of approaching religion was to backpedal away from evolution as much as he could. And so he arranged the students would have mock debates citing Ann Coulter. And he would have the children take up opposing positions where one person has to support the Ann Coulter position and other people are arguing against that. So the teacher basically has an opportunity to learn evolution from his high school students. The teacher called me, or not called me, but he sent me an email and he was inquiring about what to do. And this was the first time anybody had invited me to do something along these lines. And so I suggested to him, okay, this is what you do. And this goes for everybody here too. It matters that you get the evidence before the accusation. That's what we need. Because if you want to take somebody to court, if you want to threaten somebody's job, if you want to have any power at all, make sure that what their children are telling you is happening really is happening. And the only way to really get that done is to have the teacher admit to it in writing. So I told the parent, this is what you do, and be very, very careful about that. I helped him word the letter. I want you to write back the complaints that you gave me, the things that your son is telling you that they are doing in this class, that he's saying and doing. I want you to put all these down here and say, are you really saying this? Is this really your position? And clarifying all these things. And it was a very short letter, but it went to the point on several different points that were the source of the complaint. And here's what you do. When you send it back to the coach, don't blind carbon copy. Carbon copy. Let him know that it's also going to his principal. And let him know that it's also going to me. And to American Atheists. And to the National Center for Science Education. And to the Texas Freedom Network. And to the Texas Citizens for Science. Let him know. This is what there's going to be a recourse here. That you will be held accountable. If anything, creationists will not be held accountable for anything. I think that's what their entire religion is based on. The downside of that, the response came within 30 minutes, and the gym coach used the excuse that it was just a joke. He was just joking. These students had only paid however many hundreds of dollars each to take this course, and it had been going on for weeks. And I hope it was a really good joke and everybody was laughing really hard because they're paying for an education and they're getting Ann Coulter. And we didn't have anything else we could do with that, unfortunately, because we never got an admission from the coach that he was actually saying or actually held or actually taught any of these things. Instead, the concerned parent lobbied in against my recommendations and started charging the teacher with all these accusations. And until you have the evidence, it is pointless to do that. Sit back, be quiet, and just listen, gather your information, and then we can do something, maybe. One expects, except for situations like this, one expects that the things that we would want to address would already be found in the news, but that's not always the case, especially for activists. It's sometimes our job to make it news, if it's warranted. And there's another important issue that slipped past all of us, unreported by any of the students or parents involved. I think that's the next slide. I'll do that. Remember when a small child... No, I want to do this one. Yep. Remember when a small child asked our beloved Governor Rick Perry about evolution, and Perry said, "In Texas, we teach both creation and evolution." And we all thought this guy was completely out of touch, because doesn't he know that it's a violation of the Constitution to teach creationism in public schools? You can't do that, right? And how does he not know the Constitution any better than that? But it turns out that Perry knew something we didn't. We were teaching creationism in our supposedly secular public schools, and we have been for years. And I don't mean in a slight way or a subtle way, I mean full on. House Bill 1287 passed in 2007. Originally, it allowed that a school district may offer an elective course in the history and literature of the Old Testament era as contrasted with the New Testament era. And again, I'm already against this. I mean, I don't mind if you want to treat it as literature. And I saw where Zach Copeland outraged somebody because he dared to call the Bible literature. I mean, I would have thought if you came on to teach the Bhagavad Gita, well, the same elective ought to pay equal attention to. Did I say the Bhagavad Gita? I didn't mean to. I wanted to bring that up. But have the Quran, have the Bhagavad Gita, have other people's holy books in there as well. Now, of course, the idea of teaching Bible in school was very well received in Texas, and so they changed the wording so that it became may offer to shall offer, making it mandatory. Mark Chansey, professor of religious studies at SMU, compiled a detailed report on how the bill was implemented across the state. He found that only 3 of those districts taught the courses in a legally and academically sound manner that was respectful toward the biblical material and the diverse sensibilities and backgrounds of the students. The other 22 courses all assumed or encouraged religious views specific to Protestant Christianity, thus promoting that one faith perspective above any other. The House Public Education Committee also required that the State Board of Education impose standards on the biblical instruction and to make additional materials available on that topic. And that is a whole other series of problems. First you involve the SBOE, and then you say get additional materials. Where do you think the additional materials are coming from? So they did, and despite recommendations from the prior committee, the Board of Education allowed broadly defined parameters rather than content-specific standards. Teachers were given neither direction nor restriction. They weren't given instruction either. They were supposed to receive specific training, but most never got it. A few who did had only a one-day session in which to learn the Old Testament as contrasted with the New Testament. And obviously, the court, to contrast the two, fell away completely. They saw it as one long fulfilled prophecy. And since the teachers didn't know what they were talking about or weren't going to be trained in it, they had to get special teachers that already had training, so many of them were ministers. 2 held advanced degrees in Bible study, and both of their courses contained numerous elements that federal courts have explicitly identified as unconstitutional. In all these courses, factual inaccuracies were reported as frequent, whether through the innocence of ignorance, lacking specific education, or through deliberate intent. A fair number of the courses were reported as blatantly and thoroughly sectarian, presenting religious views as fact and implicitly or explicitly encouraging students to adopt those views. And in every case where a course promotes religious views, the views in question are Christian, conservative, and Protestant. Some of the districts stayed exclusively with the approved materials, and those that did had fewer problems than others because other districts relied on books and videos that were provided by ministries which expressed the intent of converting non-believers and strengthening faith. The movies shown to 9th grade students included Cecil B. DeMille's The 10 Commandments, 9th grade students, The Passion of the Christ,
Nice.
and Left Behind with Kirk Cameron. Yeah. Several districts endorse, favor, or promote specific religious beliefs by suggesting or stating flat out that the Bible was dictated by God and is thus free of any historical, scientific, or theological error. The The report says that preventing such views as if they are factually accurate blatantly crosses the legal threshold. The problem is, you need to have students in the course to complain that they're being lied to. But then you have to have somebody who opted to take a Bible course, who didn't already believe in the Bible course, to know that he was going to be lied to. So you have to get a student who takes the class expecting to be lied to complain to be lied to in order to do anything about it. Some of the districts were supplied by the National Council on Bible Curriculum in Public Schools, and that source cites a book called Signature of God. The cover promises documented evidence that proves beyond doubt that the Bible is the inspired Word of God. Another of their books is Secrets of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which concludes, there are many secrets yet to be searched out from the scrolls, but there is no secret to a personal relationship with God through faith in Jesus the Messiah. The only resource submitted by Lasbuddy ISD is a Journal of a Lifetime, a 52-lesson study of an entire Bible by Oklahoma minister Tommy C. Higgle, and it includes tips for your personal study. In its introduction, it says, pray for God's guidance before each lesson, and don't worry about the scriptures you don't understand. Simply concentrate on what God reveals to you in His Word and trust Him to make the vague things seem clearer as you continue to study. And this book includes a section on how to receive salvation. So at least your children are learning something. Mind you, one thing that they don't cover is, as I said, the contrast between the Old Testament and the New Testament. They certainly don't cover the biblical history, how it came to be and how it came about. I went to a Bible, well, not a Bible specific, but it was a history of world religions course. It was one of the best classes I'd ever taken, and I was the only non-Christian in the classroom. I don't know if there were more non-Christians by the end, but there probably should have been. Gene Taylor's The Gospel of John, Evidences for Belief from 2005, used by Dayton ISD, and this was one of the worst school districts in the whole report, makes its purpose clear on its purpose. May this study be of value to you. May you fully come to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and may you have life in His name. Sorry, I can't help I know Jerry is going to be judging me on how well I do these. I'm gearing up. You see, Matt told me we could really make a bunch of money if we just suddenly accept God after being foremost. There we go. So what exactly have our kids been learning in our supposedly secular state-funded schools over the last few years? Let's see, I don't have any idea. Here we go. A PowerPoint slide in Brenham ISD. A PowerPoint slide in Brenham ISD emphasizes Christ's resurrection was an event that occurred in time and space, that it was a reality, historical, and not mythological. Eastland ISD shows videos produced by Creation Evidence Museum. If you guys are not familiar with that, it's run by a Dr. Carl Baugh. He's a charlatan claiming a bogus PhD, and a man who is so disreputable that even other creationists call him a fraud on a level with P.T. Barnum. He is most famous for forging human footprints and making it look as though they walked with dinosaurs 6,000 years ago, or in 6,000-year-old strata, 6,000-year-old Cretaceous strata. He really knows how to work these. And that footprint, or his footprints that he found, are reportedly part of the 9th grade Texas students' curriculum. And then, students in the Point Isabel Independent School District course spent 2 days watching what lesson plans describe as the historic documentary of ancient aliens. which presents a new interpretation of angelic beings described as extraterrestrials. Students were then asked to write a small paragraph on how valid they think the ancient alien theory is. Ector County's Permian High School, this is where George Bush is from, includes this claim. Sad to say, mainstream anti-God media do not portray these true facts in the light of faith, but prefer to skeptically doubt such archaeological proofs of the veracity and historicity of the biblical account as one of the most accurate history books in the history of the world. Hey, you ready for some test questions? Explain what happens between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 according to the gap theory. The answer makes no attempt to explain the many contradictions between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. We're talking about just the first two verses of the first chapter. And one intended answer is that, that Yahweh threw Satan and a third of the angels down to the first earth. Anybody remember which verse it talks about how many earths there are? So, the one from an old Dallas High School Bible course textbook. What is the strongest evidence of the Bible's divine origin? And the intended answer reads, the greatest evidence of the Bible's divine origin is fulfilled prophecy. A quiz in the Huntsville Independent School District course asks, how might the Passover be a sign foreshadowing Christ? Now, as I said, Jews barely exist in this state, and it's little wonder why. Can you imagine a Jewish child sitting in this class listening to how Passover is foreshadowing Christ? And nobody seems to understand how that might be disrespectful of somebody else's religious beliefs. The same sectarian approach is advanced in presentations in other parts of the Tanakh. An Amarillo ISD unit tests Genesis through Nehemiah and asks questions like, which prophet foretold that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem? And who foretold a virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son? And if you read that chapter, it's obvious that Isaiah could not possibly be talking about Jesus, but that's just one of the many problems with this Bible study program. Several districts tried to construct a history timeline, confidently conjuring conflicting dates from one district to another. For example, Boys Ranch ISD has Moses writing Genesis around 1500 BC, while Refugio ISD has Moses composing Deuteronomy over 100 years later in 1406, specifically 1406. That was the year that Moses wrote it. I don't know how to know that. I guess you count generations, and that it somehow ends up with him. This is the year he did that. Okay. Then I always understood that the scholarly perspective was that none of the Pentateuch could actually be attributed to Moses at all. That he likely never even existed, because everything that is attributed to him was attributed to other people centuries prior. And that if he did exist, he likely would have been living closer to 1250 BC. But I'm just going by the scholars, and what the hell do they know? Somebody's got to stand up to these experts. There's a bit of traditional bigotry in these courses too, especially anti-Jewish sentiment. Amarillo's course materials included a chart titled Racial Origins Traced from Noah. And it uses modern racial and national terminology to identify the ancient tribes mentioned in the text as descendants of the three sons. According to the chart, Western Europeans and Caucasians descend from Japheth, African races and Canaanites from Ham, Jews and Semitic people and Oriental races from Shem. An Amarillo chart outlines all the ways in which Hebrews suggests that Jesus is superior to Judaism. Problem is that they also go a bit further by actually endorsing this beyond what the scripture says. Other courses depict Judaism and particular Jewish sects in the time of Jesus as legalistic, hypocritical, or spiritually empty. Longview ISD speaks appreciatively of the monotheism and moral and ceremonial purity. of the Pharisees, and then categorically denounces them, saying Jesus exposed their hypocrisy and self-righteousness. The book used at Lasbuddy ISD says thousands of Orthodox Jews still today earnestly anticipate the coming of the Messiah, and after the church is gone from the earth, God will take the veil from many of their eyes, and they will embrace Jesus Christ as the true Messiah. However, students in the Eastland course learn to prepare traditional Hamantaschen cookies for Purim. They look at latke recipes for Hanukkah. They sing and dance the Hava Nagila. They meet a Holocaust survivor, and they visit the Dallas Holocaust Museum. Pretty good, right? They also get a handout describing a Jewish holiday which commemorates the destruction of the 2 Jewish temples, and that handout ends with the proclamation, "Jesus is Lord." As might be expected, there is also a distortion of American history. Belton ISD uses a religious tract titled "One Nation Under God." It begins by saying, "The United States was founded on the principles of liberty of the Holy Bible and the reverence of the Founding Fathers." To support this contention, the tract presents quotes from William Penn, John Quincy Adams, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin, and excerpts from texts like the Pledge of Allegiance. It concludes, "Giving God his rightful place in the national life of this country has provided a rich heritage for all its citizens. Yet, as wonderful as the benefits of that heritage may be, a true relationship with God is not a matter of national declaration, but rather a personal responsibility of each individual citizen." It then asks, "Would you like to place your trust in Jesus Christ and receive him as your Savior from sin?" And remember, these are state-funded, tax-supported, supposed to be secular schools. Another Belton ISD resource titled "Timely Words About God's Timeless Word" consists entirely of favorable quotes from famous figures about the Bible. Students are then tested over their ability to match the quotes to the speaker. The problem is that the authors couldn't seem to do that because the person who compiled this report identified many of those quotes as spurious. He also provides, the author of the report also provides an equivalent list of authentic counter-quotes from some of the same people advocating the opposite position. He also included a reference from firstamendmentcenter.org, just to give you an idea of what the limitations on this kind of Bible study program, though permissible, ideally, actually are. The school's approach to religion is academic, not devotional. Okay, they failed that. The school may strive for student awareness of religion, but should not press for students' acceptance of any religion, and they failed that. The school may sponsor study about religion, but may not sponsor the practice of religion. The school may expose students to a diversity of religious views, but it may not impose, discourage, or encourage any particular view. The school may educate about religion, but may not promote or denigrate any religion. And how many times have they failed each one of these? The school may inform the student about various beliefs, but it should not conform him or her to any particular belief. Now, I'd like to conclude my review of Chansey's report with a comment I found in the middle of it. There is no reason why students cannot learn about the historically influential interpretations or doctrines, e.g. the Trinity, the fall, the serpent as Satan, in the name of cultural literacy. And I should remind you that the man who compiled this report, the man who is writing these words, is himself a Christian. But there's nothing that I would not admire about the way that he approaches this report or his position here. He continues, but those interpretations should be presented as the products of interpretive practices and traditions of particular religious communities, not as universal and self-evident readings. Politicized religious extremism doesn't just want to control your children and to deceive and mislead them and turn them into unquestioning minions. It also wants to restrict your rights as adults too. I think, I could have had this slide on this whole time. Just let you take a look at that for a moment. Yeah, I put this together very quickly, I apologize. All right, so next one. You know, I often complain that here in Texas we teach abstinence-only sex education, and that is why Texas ranks highest in the nation in repeat teen pregnancies. And I should throw out that there was a news article that I read, and it really was a news article that said that teen pregnancies decline after a child turns 25. I'm going to steal another one of my wife's stories so that she'll have one less joke to share at dinner this evening. She was forced to allow these people who represent some family organization. You know, when you have an organization that calls themselves, you know, like Concerned Family Parents or whatever, you know that it's a religious extremist group. And so they send in this guy who's like 80 years old and has his pants up to his nipples, and he's coming in to talk to the kids about sex. And one of the things that he told them was that the children asked about oral sex and did it feel good. So it's obviously very young students here. And the teacher said, no, oral sex did not feel good because you were too worried about getting STDs the whole time. Obviously he hadn't had any either. Okay, so last year, Planned Parenthood, when I say last year, I could just about say last month. I mean, it was December. Planned Parenthood was effectively defunded in the state of Texas for spending 3% of their funds on abortion. None of the funds used for abortions come from federally funded Medicaid, which is the reason that they were disfunded, because you're not supposed to use, because the Hyde Amendment passed several years ago, you're not supposed to use any of those Medicaid funds for that purpose, so they don't. But they were defunded anyway. So why is abortion a legal medical procedure since 1973, a cause to defund a health care provider for 48,000 of our state's 110,000 low-income women? Okay, and I finally remember where my slides are supposed to go. This is just to give you an idea of what they actually do. Let's be clear, the overwhelming majority of Planned Parenthood services are for women's health concerns, like cancer screening, contraceptions, treatment of certain infections, and the prevention of STDs. And even if that were not the case, abortion is still legal in the U.S., so why is this such an issue? Abortion has been relentlessly targeted by the religious right ever since Roe versus Wade. 3 years after abortion was legal, Congress passed this Hyde Amendment prohibiting the use of federal funds for that purpose, and the decision to defund Planned Parenthood based on that amendment was upheld last month by a district court judge, Gary Harder. And I'm going to mention how to deal with things that have already gone to pass. Let's forget for a moment the constitutionality of refusing a legal medical procedure based on religious convictions. Our beloved governor, who promises to be the greatest economic, educational, environmental, or medical enemy we've ever had, actually applauds depriving nearly half of the state's low-income women of health care services provided by Planned Parenthood, while at the same time saying that the decision clears the way for Texas women to access needed care. This is a quote, as mysterious as it is, this is what he actually said about it. Today's ruling finally clears the way for thousands of low-income Texas women to access much-needed care, while at the same time respecting the values and laws of our state. I applaud all those who stand ready to help these women live healthy lives without sending taxpayer money to abortion providers and their affiliates. And just as a side note on this, my wife happened across another article as we were looking through this, and she said that there was an investigation done, I think it was in Austin, where there were supposed to be at least a half a dozen or more alternate agencies to turn to. And that when, actually more, I think it was a dozen. And the news team that was investigating these called every one of these numbers. And I think it was a pathetic amount, like 2, that actually provided those services out of all of the others. They didn't take part in the program at all, and these were the ones that women were being directed to for the many options to Planned Parenthood. Responsible and rational people can still help out. Here's one suggestion by Austin State Representative Donna Howard. She says, I vehemently disagree with the state's efforts to blacklist a qualified provider and therefore interfere with a woman's right to choose her own provider. I will be submitting a letter to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission requesting a list of approved providers to gauge the outreach of one program and ensure that all qualified women throughout the state have access to their services. In addition to that, I should have waited a moment on that. I'm not quite done with the parenthood thing, but there's one last thing. There will be a lobby in support of Planned Parenthood on the steps of the state capitol in Austin on March 7th. That's a Thursday. You can contact me. We found out there are ways of getting down there for $25 with lunch included there, so there's going to be quite a rally on the steps. Hopefully people will join us. Now you have an idea of the situation facing secular citizens in Texas. Remind you, most of these things that I'm talking about have only been revealed in the last 2 months. So what can you do? You can donate to American Atheists. And we cover the legal battles. But sometimes, particularly here in Texas, sometimes legal battles aren't always the best option. Because depending on the situation, another way might be better. You can also donate to the Texas Freedom Network or sign up for their rapid response team on their website, which will keep you informed and give you instruction and give you contacts. And they have been invaluable in a number of the protests that we've already done. So I want to encourage their support. And you can picket the Capitol or petition legislation through traditional means. But because we're living in the bright and shiny new world of the future, you can now petition these people directly through social media. As I mentioned earlier, I posted something to Barbara Cargill's personal Facebook. When we first looked at Dwayne Bohawk's Facebook, it was all attaboys. It's like, oh, you're looking out for our religious beliefs, and everybody's telling what a great guy he is. And the problem is like I said, these people will not be accountable. They will do whatever they want to do, especially when they think that it's going to get them a pat on the back. And that includes when they're dissing on other religions and when they're teaching children known lies and all of that. But if you do hold them accountable, if you do show outrage or a response that isn't patting on the back, if it's more boot to the butt, then you're going to start seeing a change in their policy. When my wife blogged about him and showed the address for his Facebook, we started looking at the way the content of the quotes on his page changed. And it's encouraging to see so many people come up, but I want to stress something. If you're going to respond to somebody directly through social media, if you're going to comment on somebody's Facebook, don't be rude. Don't be harassing. This is the best way some of us have of getting in touch with people you can't otherwise reach. But the way these people think is if one person comes up and says something rude or stupid or trollish or childish, it will cause all other well thought out and well presented comments to be disregarded. So that's not going to help anybody. And I think that's just a couple more things here. So hold them accountable, call them out, do it loudly, blog about it, make videos, make sure everybody knows when it is a big deal. Get creative, get involved in a group, pool on collective minds, gather your strength, rally in numbers. Until the religious wrong realize that they better start worrying about what we think. Thank you.
gathering evidence in school, I know that some students have recorded their teachers, and in some places that's been declared illegal. Can you tell me what kind of evidence students can gather in Texas?
Well, multiple testimony obviously would be helpful. In this case, all I was shooting for was the teacher's admission that he actually said these things, and if the teacher says he didn't and the classroom says he did, that might be something we can use also. I don't know. I know that in my own experience, my son was in a class that was teaching evolution. They were actually on the topic of evolution, and the teacher said that there's never been any such thing as a beneficial mutation. There's a provided textbook. My son had it open to the page. He's got his finger on the text. He says, "But teacher, the textbook lists beneficial mutations." And he was reprimanded by the teacher for arguing with him in class. Now I understand that my son argues with everybody. But in this case it was justified. And I wanted to make that teacher famous. But his mother told me no. She pulled the reins in on me and asked me to let him get through school without making a spectacle of my son. And there's another problem. Because you can't do anything to these people if you can't use the children. There's got to be really the children's decision to do it because of that. And that's the problem, because they go into school not knowing anything. So at least secular parents can have our students trained to recognize what's going on, hopefully. And many of them, like the Crumpacker kid, man, some of these kids are really brilliant. But it takes, I think, our kids and some background education beforehand to recognize when they're being misled in the classroom.
Do you know if it's legal to record in Texas?
I don't know that. I can't imagine that it is illegal. It was a surprise to me that you told me that it was illegal to record in the classroom. I would have thought that public classrooms should be recorded anyway.
Regarding the Merry Christmas bill, as a retired teacher, I can certainly relate to the position that puts secular teachers in, that you may be forced to come out and say what it is that you believe. I mean, as a matter of conscience, if I was still teaching and everyone else all the other teachers were promoting their religious beliefs for the holidays, I would feel compelled to promote mine. And like my t-shirt says, keep Saturn and Saturnalia. I would have to put up images of Roman Bacchanalian orgies all around the room. And, I just don't know how that would go over. But anyway, that's all.
Okay. Any more?
Yeah, we're out of time.
Okay. Thank you, and I hope that didn't suck.